Welcome to episode 5 of the Rust programming language series. In this episode, we're going to create an application that uses the loop expression in Rust. And for this application, you need to have Rust and a text editor installed on your computer. And if you haven't watched my previous episodes on Rust, I'd suggest that you go do that now. Alright, so hopefully you know this already, but you want to start by opening your terminal, navigating to where you store your Rust files, and in there you want to create a new project with Cargo. So I'm going to name mine episode 5, and now that that's done, you want to open up your favorite text editor. I personally use Visual Studio Code, and then you want to open up your folder, your project folder that you just created. So that's episode 5 for me. So we're going to focus on the main.rust file in the source directory, and we can remove this print line statement. And as usual, we want to start by commenting our function. So what is this application going to do? Well, it will create an infinite loop. Alright, so in your main function, to create a loop, you want to use the loop expression, and you define what's going to be inside your loop with the curly braces. So in my infinite loop, I'm going to use the print line, and then I'm gonna write, "This is my loop!" exclamation point. And let's not forget about the semicolon. So save that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the terminal in here, and then we can use the cargo run to look at it. So I am not in my project folder, so this is the error that you're going to find if you're not in your project folder. But now that I'm in my project folder, it should work. Yes, as you guys can see, this works perfectly fine because we wanted to create an infinite loop, and that's just what has happened. But this is not very useful, so instead we're going to change our comment, because what we want to do now is we want to create an infinite loop, but it's going to count all the cycles. So we'll create an infinite loop that counts the cycles. So to do this, we want to define a new variable. So the variable we're going to define is going to be called cycle, and it's going to be equal to 0 because we want to start at 0. So all that we have to do now is in our loop, we want to write this cycle equals cycle plus 1, which is going to increment our cycle by 1 for each loop. But we also want to know which cycle we're at in the print line statement. So we're going to change this to "this is cycle," and then we use the curly braces to show Rust that we want to have a variable right here. So what variable are we going to use? Well, obviously it's going to be this cycle. Now, there's an error in this code right here, so hopefully you guys can find it, and if you can't, our compiler is going to find it for us. So compile that and try to run it. But as you can see here, our error is cannot assign twice to an immutable variable, and this is due to Rust's safety. So since we haven't declared this as a mutable variable, Rust thinks that we're never going to change it. If you add mute before the variable name and then recompile, this should work fine. Alright. And also, if you want to kill your program, you can use the Control-C in the terminal to kill it in a Unix environment. Alright, so as you can see, this works perfectly fine, and it does what we want it to do. It increments by 1 cycle each time, but this is still not very useful. So we're going to change this one last time, and now what we want is an application application that counts from 0 to 100. Alright, so how do we change this? Well, in the loop, we want to add an if statement. So after the cycle increment, what you want to write is if cycle is more than 100, we want to break. And break is what you use when you want to break out of a loop. Alright, so now recompile and run that, and as you can see, it counts from 0 to 100. So that concludes this episode, but I want you guys to try different things with the loop expression before moving on to episode 6 to really make sure you know how to use a loop and how to break out of a loop. So good luck and happy coding!